Now, when you guys are thinking, Paul, about content for Elder Scrolls Online, you're in an interesting spot that you've got a beta going on now. People are giving you feedback constantly. So I assume that's informing and shaping where the game is going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. We we have a large beta right now going on, and one of the things we did as an example is, originally we had a mini map up in the top screen to kind of show you where to go, and as we played, we noticed people were beelining more, to certain things, and what we wanted to do was, really highlight the exploration part because, well, it's Elder Scrolls, right? And so we went back with the compass. And then, tested that out, and that tested really positively, and we watched how people played. So yeah, it definitely informs that. I'm sure it's going to inform, all content going forward at this point, because I think the trick, having worked on live games before, is to make sure that you make the right changes, because if you make the wrong change, you kind of hear about it pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, but the great thing is you get that real-time feedback from players being online and being a part of it, and for you guys doing the story-driven game, it's a little tougher.
The biggest problem that we have is the player understanding what to do next.
Right.
And sometimes it's self-evident, but sometimes they just have severe problems with things that we don't.
That's why you light that texture a little more.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really hard to know where to draw the line.
Yeah.
Because you basically need another. And we try to avoid it as much as possible to just have a marker in the world. Because we don't want to do that level of hand-holding.
Right.
So we try to let the environment be.
The arrow, right? The Bioshock arrow to show you exactly where to go.
We try to let the world be sort of readable, but it's not always. It doesn't always work the way we hoped, And sometimes people get confused on what we think is, why don't they get this?
Yeah.
And then we have to test it out, and.
So do you ever think, I know games patch now and things like that, but do you ever think, in this new connected world, sort of like these online games, could single-player games get to the point where it's like you're sort of like tweaking the game once it's actually live,
Like while you're playing the game, some guy's about to grab a pickup and it just vanishes. What?
Gone.
Live update
something where it's
from
like,
the
hey,
developer.
this puzzle was, some people do this. I remember God of War did this year where it's like, hey, this puzzle was too hard. So like, let's scale back the difficulty a little bit, or like, let's actually, not on an instant basis, but on a weekly basis, saying like, hey, let's tweak this. Let's, adapt to the player feedback.
I mean, that's certainly possible. I don't know what the console manufacturer's stance would be on the bandwidth that would consume.
Right.
I think the instant updating would be great for a horror game.
Right. Seriously, right? Yeah. No, random, unpredictable things happening. It's like your game is gonna, you're gonna put the disc in, and you never know sort of where it's going to go or take you.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of, in that, and some games have played with that, like on a certain date, or in the Batman games, you go back, visit Calendar Man, he says something new on certain days, and it sort of, inspires you to kind of keep going back and seeing how the experience is going to evolve.
But it's freaky too, because games are these things that you can improve forever.
Right.
Because you're never 100% satisfied, and you can always make it better, and always ways of making it better.
Yep.
But at some point, you have to draw the line and move on, or we would be working on them for 10 years,
Mm-hmm. It's happened before.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a bit about Wolf and sort of, that game. Obviously, classic franchise. There have been a lot of games over the years. One of the things I think Bethesda does great is kind of hone in on the core of a franchise and really sort of, try and plus it up and do something different with it.
Mm-hmm.
The shooter genre, very competitive, obviously, lots of games out there. When you look at, what you're doing with Wolf, and I played the new demo here that the press has been playing, which is really cool. A lot of like story, kind of remind me, Bioshock with some of the sort of inner narrative of the character. What did you want to do with that game that sort of honors the legacy of Wolf, but also obviously has to, step forward in some directions because the gameplay of Wolf was so primitive back then.
Right. No, we really, above all, we wanted to feel like a Wolf game.
Right. What does a Wolf game feel like to you?
Well, essentially, it's the things that id Software established when they invented the genre. So it's a lot of. We try to avoid the situations where you're basically encountering a scenario in terms of the combat I'm talking about now, where you're like, okay, there's my cover, you take your cover position, and then your enemies take their cover position, and you're essentially just trying to pop each other's heads. So we work a lot with forcing the player to move around in the environment and pick up, because we don't have full regenerating health or anything like that. You have to be constantly on the move, and we create these very ambulatory sequences, which lead to very sort of high octane. It's almost, when I play it, I approach it like as if I'm playing a deathmatch.
Okay.
So it's constantly moving and constantly sort of, never standing still, because then you get hit, you know. And that sort of visceral sense that those games had, we really want to continue that. We don't want to lose that. But of course, there are a lot of things about modern shooters that are really great as well. And so it's a bit of a hybrid, and there's a lot of our own ideas on top of that.
What do you hope, like, you know, Wolf will contribute to the genre, and then other folks that make these games after playing it will say, like, hey, wow, it's like, that was better than a lot of other shooters. Like, we could do better.
Yeah, I look at it as, that's how we've seen the project all along, is that it's an action adventure.
Right.
It's not a pure shooter. It's about exploring. It's about being in this world. So it has a really intense, high-octane combat.
Yeah.
This is my gun sign.
I can see that. Take it down.
But it's also very rich in terms of characters and the story that we're telling. So it's about polishing that sculpture to a level we've never reached before, and just when the goal is, when the player sits down and starts playing, they don't stop until they're all the way through.
Right.
And just having a really varied and compelling experience throughout the whole thing.
Wow. Now, let's talk a bit about Dishonored, Ricardo, and sort of how you guys approach that genre, which you know, I think people really loved what you guys did with it. But the design of that, I'm sure, you know, evolved quite a bit. And you know, Rob and Harvey have talked about that before, about sort of the finding what was going to work. And contribute to the genre. But after, you know, that's out now, I mean, what do you think the takeaway has been about? Why do you think Dishonored worked?
Well, part of it, I think, has a lot to do with the universe. So I was actually going to mention this even with what Jens was talking about. Like part of the thing that's compelling to me about Wolfenstein is the setting. Like that's something that I won't get anywhere else, right? Part of the reason that I play games, read books, watch movies is to be transported, to explore something that I couldn't possibly see any other way. And so I think that's one of the core strengths of the Dishonored universe, is like, this is a world with living, breathing characters that you will not experience anywhere else. And that's one of my favorite things in games and in books and in movies, is to visit a place that is amazing and is full of wonder and challenging and dangerous and unique.
Exactly, that thing is what got me into games. So when I was a kid, I was just so fascinated by this idea that you could pull something from your imagination and turn it into a place, and you could be there. That's like the whole idea.
A lot of people talk about fantasy as escapism, and I think there's some truth to that, but I think it's more than that, and sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's just exploration. It's like, what's over that next hill? What's at the top of that mountain? What's at the bottom of that valley? I want to go see.
I think that's why, you know, for me, that was one of the best things about working on Elder Scrolls, and we just talked about was, you know, the compass. That exploration is, you know, I like when I'm currently on a task, I'm currently doing something for the game, and all of a sudden, there's just something else to go do, and it's like, which one of the things am I going to go do at this point, right? And the reason that I like that is because there's something almost mirroring life about that for me. I'm not saying I'm easily distractible. I'm just saying that it's one of those things I really like, is knowing that there's a choice of what I want to go do, and also another big thing is choice itself. Just that one word is all about the power you have over the game itself, right? Is the choices you make. And so I think making sure that the players have enough power over their environment is really key for us, you know, at this point.
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up, especially where, you know, Dishonored gave you kind of a lot of choice in how you played through the game, and Wolf, I mean, more linear, though I did have one point where I had to choose which guy this morning.
Ixnay.
All right, not allowed to talk about that. Leave it there. But, you know, things like that, it's how much does choice factor into into game design now? I mean, is that something you think, like these emergent narratives and things like that? Is that, maybe you guys could both talk about that, because in some ways, you know, you guys are approaching it from different perspectives.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where if you make the kind of game that we do, you want the player to feel like they made the choice, but you want to control the outcome. Okay. So it's a little counterintuitive, and it takes a lot of work to put scenarios like that together.
The illusion of choice.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. But there are some really powerful examples of that, like BioShock and like Last of Us, or those types of games that are essentially very linear. But you have this very
depends on what level of choice you're talking about, too, because even in the combat, like in your game, there's still like the super low level choice of like how the combat plays out.
Do you want to knife the guy? Do you want to?
And
that's significant.
We try to support in as much as possible people's different play styles. So most of the combat scenarios, you can stealth through them if you want to.
Pretty hard though, right?
No, it's not. No, because well, it depends. If you
Can I play through Wolf without killing a guy? Probably not.
No, you have to kill them, of course. That goes without saying. But
can I play through Wolf only with a knife? I guess sort of.
Not every scenario, but most scenarios, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's gonna be. I can see that playthrough on YouTube of a guy playing through Wolf. Knife only playthrough?
Sure.
All right.
You could be that guy.
No, I would not survive. But yes, there's probably someone that could. On God mode, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, so
I think one of our level design tenets at Arkane is to make sure that levels are replayable and that scenarios can play out in a number of different ways. And some of that falls back on the like low-level gameplay systems, like making sure the AIs have rules and that they can go on their own, right? But then some of it is handcrafted. So like we try to set up dramatic scenes like, hey, what if there's this scene here where one guy is trying to poison another, like in the original game. And some of those things are like the fact that there's a guy scripted to walk in to like poison the guy that's scripted and handcrafted. But then we try to think through like, this isn't a cinematic, so the player might come in before the guy walks into the room and smash the bottles. Well, what happens then? Okay, so that has to partially be scripted, but then it will fall back on general gameplay systems like people going on patrols and raising the alarm and stuff like that. But we have to iterate through like, what if the player comes in while they're talking and he's not dead yet? What if the player shoots the guy right before he drinks the poison? What if the player puts a bomb on the tray and then just watches from the rafters and so all of those things have to be taken into account. And it's like this, ours is like a hybrid of the systemic gameplay plus crafting some of the responses.
The biggest can of worms you can
it's totally a nightmare to develop, but it's really rewarding and fun. And the result is that everybody has a different funny story about what happened in that scene.
So one of the challenges for us is you can experience the way we've set up the world in almost any way, so you can go to different areas. But we also wanted to have a story that's going through the zones, I know that some of our designers have always felt like, oh, I just want to tell this, this linear story, and it's so important to tell the story. But at the same time, we restrain ourselves and make sure that you can experience it in any order. And that's been a really tough, thing for us to do is to still tell a meaningful story that goes throughout the regions in the zone, and then make sure that the players can experience it in any order. And so you're really just filling in the story in kind of a weird, strange Memento style sometimes. It's been hard, but I think it's been rewarding.
But a big thing about that is also the people who really love the story, they will play it as you intended it. They will wait for people to finish speaking, and they won't skip the cinematics, and they will have that experience. But the people who don't care, you're not really servicing them anyway with that thing. They get off on other things. So then for them, it's more about alleviating the obstacle to give them the sort of thing that they're after.
Yeah. And sometimes, what someone's after can be different based on the game and the genre. Paul, you guys have, I think, fought that battle with Elder Scrolls Online for a number of years here in terms of, obviously fans of the Elder Scrolls franchise transitioning that to, a new sort of genre, I guess. You know, in some ways, you know, you had that too with Wolf, and you know, it's still a shooter, but obviously the format has evolved. Can you talk a bit about, Paul, you know, the creative direction of sort of, you know, moving that franchise, that beloved franchise, to a new genre, and you know what you had to keep the same, and what had to be different by nature of the genre changing?
There's so many ways to answer this. When we started, you know, what we did is we said, what is it that MMO players like? What is it that they don't like? What is it that Skyrim and Elder Scrolls players like? And what is it that they don't like? And we really started looking for pairings of those things. As an example, you know, we felt that, you know, I know a lot of people like MMO combat, but there's one of those things where I've played this, there's kind of a fatigue about sometimes playing the interface. And so one of the things we felt strongly about was that people like Skyrim combat. And so we said that this kind of naturally fits in. You know, you're looking around the world. We reduced the interface elements so you're not just pressing buttons. We want you seeing in the world. You know, and it seems like such a simple thing. But kind of that analysis as we went through of, you know, what is it that carries over? You know, leveling is another one that's, you know, it's a hard decision, right, on what you're going to do. And even internally, it becomes one of those things. Because you can build a game without levels, absolutely, and still make it a compelling experience. But there's something special about being able to brag and say, like, yeah, hey, I'm watermarked now. You know, I'm stronger, and I can really see that, and I can really feel that. That makes that compelling. And so we thought that was a very compelling experience. You know, Skyrim has levels, but the world levels to you as you level, and that was something that would have been really hard to do with you know, millions of players online. So we wanted to make sure that we kept that watermarking as part of that social experience. And so, you know, it was just going through all of those things and saying, what is it we're really trying to create? You know, and I've said it over and over, but the main purpose is just to create a great RPG first, and you know, and then make sure that it's got great online elements.
Cool. One thing I wanted to ask you guys about was the idea of onboarding new players. And you know, Bethesda games are certainly known and loved by, you know, hardcore fans of gaming. But I wanted to ask you from a creative director perspective, how much do you think about, you know, how can we invite new players to play these games? How can we, you know, convince someone who's never played an Elder Scrolls to play it? Or how can we, you know, get the Call of Duty crowd to want to play, you know, Wolfenstein? I mean, that's something, you know, it's a marketing question, obviously, and a business question, but from a creative perspective, how much do you guys think about that, about how can we make this game more approachable?
Well, that is a big thing that I think everybody does, because, I mean, we get off on people having the experience we want them to have, and we want as many people as possible to have it. So it's a balancing act, because you don't want to alienate people who are hardcore, and you don't want to turn off people who just, you know, it's too complicated. But fortunately, I think Wolfenstein is it's very, at its core, people get it really easily. Right. You know?
Yeah, the mechanics
you
are
have Nazis and
yeah.
big guns, that's, you know, naturally attractive. And then we can, and then that allows us to sort of smuggle in all the cool stuff that we want to do.
I have a story that sort of crystallized how, for me personally, how unfriendly as developers we can be to new players sometimes. So I worked on the first Deus Ex game, and after we shipped that, we did a version for the PlayStation 2, which, by the way, was a small miracle trying to get Deus Ex
on
the PlayStation 2. But at some point, my brother-in-law, who he's kind of a casual gamer, he doesn't play very many games, but sometimes he plays games. And because I made that game, he ended up with a copy of the PlayStation 2 version of Deus Ex, and he put it in. He was all excited to show me, and he started playing it. And the first thing that happened was he was looking at the ground, he was looking at the ceiling. He threw his gun into the air, backed up, and fell into the water and drowned. Like, that's in the first 30 seconds of the game, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, we are horrible at, like, introducing new players to this game. So.
But I think that's interesting, because those steps is what every developer has to learn.
Yeah.
It's just how different the game looks from your perspective compared to what it looks like from just a brand new player.
Yep.
The first game we did was a game called Enclave, or the first game that got released. And it was just mayhem, complete mayhem. We didn't know what we were doing, because there was things like we had 3 levels that we hadn't even begun making when it was 3 weeks to go on the project, you know. So it's me. I'm sitting next to one of the scripters, and I usually don't dig into the gameplay too deeply. I'm more of the narrative side of things. But I was the only one who could do it because everybody else was busy. So we were sitting there together and we were like, okay, how do we make this scenario? And it was, you know, it was really complicated, and you had to fill an area with water. And as it was filling up, you were supposed to swim up to these things and do something, and that would drain the water out. And nobody understood it. Like, it was just completely impossible to play that scenario. Like, everybody drowns. There was no way. And so we have this small segment of the gaming population that loves this game because it's so incredibly unforgiving and hardcore. Yeah, those obsessive people.
Few.
Yeah, the super elite. They love it beyond words, but everybody else hates it. And so those are hard-won lessons. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, with UO, I mean, or Ultima Online, I think it goes without saying that you know, there were a lot of wolves preying on a lot of sheep, and what I mean by that is there were just players, because it was player justice, right? And the first rule you learn, or we learned, was player justice is injustice, very clearly, because it is simply who can spend the most time in the game and then just kill other people. And people's first experience in the game, I remember my girlfriend at the time got in and was like, oh, I died immediately. Why can that guy attack me? You know, and I think that's one of the lessons we learned.
Did
for
you
instance,
work on UO?
I did.
So I have you to blame for a lot of emotional pain.
You can talk to Rafstar on that one.
But that's really cool. I think a game that has really made that into its USP is DayZ. Have you played that? Where it's just super unforgiving, and you have this prisoner's dilemma where you can basically never. You can never trust another player that isn't in your sort of chat.
Right. Wow.
And as soon as you see them, you have to shoot them, otherwise they will shoot you. And there's nothing in the game that says it has to be that way, but that's just the logic of how it flows. So you're always extremely scared. And you can spend, the sick thing about that game is that you can spend like 10 hours on a hill in a ghillie suit with a sniper rifle, just waiting for zombies to emerge in the city, and it's fun. It's so bizarre. It's a really great game.
Yes. So that those lessons actually absolutely play into what we do. I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you. I loved killing other players in Ultima Online. There's no secret to that. But you know, I've kind of learned that, you know, you need to let people know what the experience is going to be before you introduce them to that kind of fun.
Right.